And I want to meet like-minded people. I want to meet people that are building. I want to make people that aren't afraid to start a podcast and have their friends make fun of them, because those are the people that change the world. Like, it's the people that aren't afraid to look stupid, that aren't afraid of failing, that end up doing the most interesting things. It's like everyone laughs at you until you're a success. And then
Welcome back to R4E, the Reason for Everything podcast. I'm your host, Arjan, and with me today is Matthew Kobach. I'm really excited for our conversation. We have a lot of overlap, most importantly as it relates to pizza, but we'll dive into that here in a moment. But Matthew, before we do, as you know, I have my guests pick a walk-up song to get the conversation started. So what's your decision today?
my song is "Do You Realize" by the Flaming Lips.
Okay, tell me why that's your. You said it's your favorite, one of your favorite songs, if not your favorite song. Tell
It
me why.
is. So music's funny. Music, I think it has to hit you at a certain point in your life, and kind of maybe when you are at one of those inflections in your life. And this is a song that I think I just graduated college or shortly after, and it just was one of those points where you didn't quite know what was going to be next, and so there's some uncertainty. So music ends up bringing a lot of comfort in those uncertain periods, and this is one that I felt the music and lyrics were kind of meaningful, and it's just stayed with me for whatever it's been, 20 odd years since I first heard it.
Excellent. And you went to Indiana University for undergrad, is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You've
All
done
right.
your homework. I love it.
Let's jump in then. All right. So maybe for those who are unfamiliar with you, I know you have a pretty incredible Twitter following now that's grown just unbelievably over the last few years specifically. But for those who might not know who you are, I'd give you the floor here to just give a quick Matthew elevator pitch.
Yeah, so I think that's a good way to start is with Twitter. I'm someone who tweets a lot, and so I've ended up with a lot of followers. But in my, what pays the bills is I work in marketing. I currently am the head of marketing at a company called Slice. They are an online ordering platform for small and local independent restaurants. We like to think we give them the same technology as all the big chains so that they can compete on a more level playing field. Before then, I was at a few startups, and before I was at the startups, I was at a company called the New York Stock Exchange, and always working in marketing, working in content, working in social media. Really good way to think about it is like, how do you get your message across to people so that they want to consume it? It's really hard, and different platforms are going to require different formats, and different audiences are going to want different messages. And whether it's a B2B audience or a consumer audience, you'll have to tweak it slightly or sometimes dramatically to get your point across and to get them to pay attention to you.
Yeah, and your social media following, what's interesting about it is your niche is social media expertise. You're not tweeting about sports content as much. You're not tweeting about, I don't know, restaurants, or you're not tweeting about random lifestyle things. You're really kind of getting your audience up to speed on the latest and greatest in social media. And I heard you on a separate podcast talking about, building a audience, building a community. The important thing about it is it's so similar to, flipping TV channels back in the day. You have to put out consistent and regular content. So how did you, become this social media guru, social media expert in the marketing world?
Yeah. I mean, how long do we have to go back? It starts with one of those kind of inflection points in life. I originally thought I was going to be a professor. I wanted to work in academia. And so I had got my master's, and I was getting my PhD. And the way that it works, and when you do a PhD, you become an expert in something. You have to like specialize in something. And there isn't, you don't pick a major. You pick an idea, you pick a concept, and you go pursue that. And I was working in really probably media psychology is the best way to put it, how media impacts people. And so you had people that had their niches. You had someone who was an expert in children in the media, and people who are experts in politics and sports. And social media at the time was just kind of starting to take shape, and it was clear that it was going to be this really big thing. And so I decided that'll be my niche. I'll be social media. And that'll be my expertise, how social media impacts people. I was very interested in how it impacted dating and relationships and stuff. And it's funny, there's an alternate reality where I'm, the social media or like online dating expert, but instead I ended up here. But what happened was doing this, dissertations move really, really slow. And so social media was not at that time, and it's still not. And so I got to a point where I would write a chapter or propose a study or something, and like Facebook or Instagram or something would dramatically change, and you just couldn't keep pace with it. During this time, I realized kind of like what was working, what was getting a lot of engagement, what was getting a lot of views. I realized I could leverage this for marketing. And so I decided on the side while I was still doing my PhD to open up a like marketing agency, like a social media marketing agency where I'd buy the ads and I had to go pitch local businesses that I should create their ads and run their ads. And so I learned that way. And so it was really just hands-on, figuring out what people responded to and figuring out what actually drove business. And I leveraged that into, Fortune 500 company and startups. And here I am today.
Very cool. And help me kind of paint the picture for the audience. So, what year was this
Mhm.
that you were diving into this? Because you've been, like you said, you've been at this for a while. What year were
Yeah.
you kind of latching onto the social media? It wasn't even a wave at that point. Maybe just the early rumblings of the start of the tide.
It was probably 2008 when it first got on my radar. The way that a dissertation or a PhD works is that you have to like take certain coursework, and that's like you don't really have a choice. You have to pick from a certain amount of classes. And so from like 2008, I believe, until 2010, it was kind of like, all right, let's do the coursework. And then 2010 is when I really got, um, really in deep with social media. And so, and this is to give like context too for someone who might be a little younger. This is before Instagram. 2010, Instagram doesn't exist. I literally remember writing my dissertation, and all of a sudden, this platform, Instagram, comes out. No one's really paying attention to it, but then Facebook buys it for $1 billion, and it's like, oh, this space is just evolving so quickly. It's going to be so difficult to catch up from an academic standpoint, which just doesn't move at the same speed.
Certainly. And I want to click into, the point about the time frame, right? 2008 to 2010, pretty volatile
Mhm.
time from a geopolitical perspective, from an economic perspective. You're going through your
Yep.
PhD. What was your headspace like at the time where you're trying to figure out, hey, what am I gonna do with this degree? Which at that time, to your point, is still in very very early innings of social media marketing as a career. If
Yep.
there were even any job titles floating out there as a social media manager.
You know what? I don't think there were. I remember actually getting a lot of guff for studying social media. Like people making fun of me, people being like, "Why would you ever spend your time on that? You're doing a dissertation on people posting gym selfies and what they had for lunch." And it kind of was always like I just, all right, cool, you make fun of me, whatever. Especially online when I mentioned online where it was a little more anonymous. But I just remember thinking, is like, this is how people are going to communicate. It's like, you can make fun of me, but I'm going to have the last laugh. And so, like, that's what was going on then. Like, this wasn't a career back then. It wasn't even an area of academic research, really. And it was this cute thing that teenagers did and college kids did, and that didn't really mean anything. It was probably just a fad and it was going to go away. But the only insight I had was that it was very clearly not a fad. So I just kind of made my bet to like get involved in this. And then also the economic standpoint too at the time, like this is right after the great financial crisis, is really hard to find a job. And so I was kind of already in academia at the time. And that certainly influenced my decision to stay in academia. It was like I had this opportunity to pursue a PhD and to continue pursuing it. You essentially, reapply every year. I maybe not reapply, but you could quit at any time. Um, and looking at the job market for someone who didn't necessarily have other marketing experience, I was just doing the social media marketing on my own. It made most sense to stay at school, and then one day it didn't make sense to stay in school, and I quit.
So you started this quasi consulting business while you're going through your PhD program. Was that really taking off, and that led to you quitting your PhD program? What was that kind of inflection point
Yeah.
like? Yeah.
I would say kind of. What doing that agency taught me was that I really liked creating content. I really liked putting something out there, seeing what people responded to, and seeing what actually could drive new business. And what I didn't like was chasing people down who hadn't paid me and figuring out how to win new business and doing taxes and whatever all the nonsense else that comes with running a business. So to me, the aha moment came when I was doing this. I was making money doing it, and probably more than what I was making. When you do a PhD, they tend to pay you a stipend. I was making more money doing this little side thing than I was pursuing the PhD. And so I was like, why don't I figure out how to get rid of the stuff I don't want to do and get paid to just do the stuff that I want to do? And that was my entry into, to getting paid to do more social media stuff.
Okay. And did that transplant you from Indiana to New York, or where was next step for you
At
after
some
dropping out of
point,
your program?
at some point. So what I ended up doing is I worked for a company in Indiana at first, and you got to start at the bottom rung somewhere. So I think it was called a social media analyst or something. To be honest, it's so long ago, I can't even forget the title. But what I would do is I would you'd look at social media content and you would, for brands and for movie openings specifically, and you would say, what are people saying? You know, like there's this new movie out. Do people, or there's a trailer for a new movie. Do people seem excited? Do they seem like angry about it? Are they even talking about it? And we'd use that data, or like there's a new shoe coming out, or people talking about it. We'd use that data to say, like, cool, you can expect X amount of sales because of this. You can expect the box office to be this big. Or you're finding, this is the example I love. Despicable Me, the original one, was coming out during this time. And the original, if you've ever seen that movie, there's the minions, the little yellow guys, but there's also, they have three daughters in there. And before the movie came out, they thought the three daughters were going to be the cute hit of the movie. And it turned out it was the minions. And so we were able to like use social media analytics to say everyone's talking about the minions. No one cares about these three girls. And so we actually gave that information back to Universal, and they then changed the trailer to highlight the minions more. So that was like the first sense of like, oh, there's interesting things going on in social media. There's data that can be mined or, you know, aggregated somehow that you can then use to make business decisions. And so did that in Indiana, and then ended up taking a role in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I am now. And little known fact about this company, the company is called Intercontinental Exchange. They're the owners of the New York Stock Exchange. I did not know this before I even applied. And so there's this company that no one's ever heard of that honestly facilitates the trading of all energy in the United States, or sorry, I should say Europe. And they bought the New York Stock Exchange right before I joined. And so that was, you know, I did the social media for them and for the New York Stock Exchange.
Excellent. Yeah, and it's probably important to not use the abbreviation for an intercontinental exchange,
Yeah.
just given the ICE connotation these days isn't the same. But what was that journey like? Did you relocate from Atlanta, or were you still in Atlanta at that point?
Yeah, so when I first got the job, so the job was based in Atlanta, so I relocated to Atlanta. And I even, it's funny, I remember this job, like again, this is if the, you know, kind of underlining theme of this podcast is inflection points. I think it's even important to talk about before I applied, or like like before I interviewed. Um, I had, you know, you throw your name out there, you're looking for jobs. It's like if you're on the hunt, you kind of apply for anything. And I wanted more practice. And I remember I applied to this company called Intercontinental Exchange. It was like, you're going to manage the content and the social media of our portfolio of exchanges. And I looked them up, and they were an energy exchange. I was like, it sounds kind of boring. And I was like, but I need practice. So I'll just do it. I'll just go ahead and have this interview. And it's about 10 minutes before. And I was like, I don't want this job. Like, why am I should bail. I shouldn't do this. And I talked myself into it. I was like, no, that's stupid. Just do it. It's fine. And so I did it. And I remember talking to my future boss at the time. They're like, do you have any questions for me? And my one question was just, I don't really get what the job is. Like, do you want me to like create content for the different energy exchanges you have around the world? Like, I just don't, this doesn't make sense. Like, I don't really see it. And she was like, oh, is it not clear in the job description? I was like, I don't know. I guess not. She's like, oh, mostly you'd be doing content and social media for the New York Stock Exchange. We just bought them. And I was like, oh, that's a lot more interesting. And I remember the interview was on a Friday. And so I spent the entire weekend doing like a case study and social media audit of what they had done. And like, here's what people are saying about you on social media. Here's the content you're putting out. Here's what's working well. Here's what you should do more of. Here's what you should do less of. And I sent that, you know, I think Sunday night or something to them. And then at that point, you know, I found out after the fact, but it was my job to lose at that point. They kind of figured, look at this person who's going above and beyond on a weekend to, you know, make our content better and make it more impactful. So got the job. It was based in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I was flying to New York maybe once a month, say. And I pitched them. I said, hey, why don't you move me to New York? I'm going here, you know, give me a raise. It's going to cost you all the same with what you're paying to put me up in New York once a month. And they said, yeah, that's a great idea. So I moved to New York and spent 4 years there.
Now, where were you in life at this point? Were you single still? Were you still dating? Because I know you mentioned you were at one point a potential or a different universe. You could have been a dating and lifestyle influencer or commenter on social media. But where were you at in life at this point?
So I moved to Atlanta in 2014. And my thought was, I'm going to be a bachelor and I'm going to have fun in this new city and I'm going to date a lot of people. And, Tinder was really just exploding then. So I feel very lucky that I got in online dating back then. It sounds like it's very different. I don't know now. But I matched with this woman named Courtney, and we went on a date, and I was like, I can't wait to go on all these other dates. And then we decided to hang out the next day and the day after that, and we just kind of never stopped dating. It was never like I never went into it going like, oh, I need to meet a significant other. It was just kind of like I'm in a new city and I want to meet a lot of people, but we had such a good time hanging out and getting along really easily. It felt really natural. So we just never stopped dating. I suppose I haven't even officially asked her to be my girlfriend, I don't think. Um, but it did that. And then we moved to New York together and we've been together ever since.
Super cool. The two interesting recurring themes on this show, and just that I'm fascinated with in general. The one is just a typical cliche of we make plans and God laughs, or the universe laughs, and you going into Atlanta as an eligible bachelor, getting ready to date a bunch of people, and then meeting your now wife pretty quickly is a
Yeah.
funny anecdote. And then the other interesting one is you mentioned you were going into the date with no expectation of really kind of
Mhm.
what the outcome was, and I regularly talk about the idea. It's a Wayne Dyer quote of open to everything, attached to nothing. It's like you go into stuff with an open mind and have no expectation of what the results look like, and usually things end up in your favor because you're not kind of set or stuck on a particular outcome coming true in your life. It's just kind of
Yeah.
enjoying the journey and being present in the moment.
It's funny, expectations can end up being the thief of joy to some extent. If you go into a vacation, you go into a job, you go into anything saying, I'm going to get X, Y, and Z out of it. When you don't get it, you've already set yourself up to be potentially unhappy. And like now achieving the things that you don't even know are going to necessarily be achievable in that interaction or in that, specific time of your life become like the baseline. So it's like you have to have these expectations met or you're going to be unhappy. And it's just not a very productive way to live life, in my opinion. It's you do want this concept of being open to more things and just, it's not that you're directionless. It's just that you realize there are things in your control and things that aren't in your control, and just accepting the things that aren't in your control that might end up being better than what you even expected.
It's so spot on, and I guess back to your story. So you took control. You asked for the opportunity to relocate to New York. You get up to the city in the role with the New York Stock Exchange social media management. What was that like transitioning from Indiana, then Atlanta, then New York? Were you right into the? I mean, I guess you were going regularly for work at that point, once a month, anyways. But what was that transition like for you? Pretty different than Atlanta in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I loved it. I miss New York. I'm no longer in New York. The pandemic forced me out of New York. I would love to go back. I'd love to live there again. I've got a young son. I've got another son on the way. If either of them ever asked me, Matt, should I go move to New York? I would say yes in an absolute heartbeat. Yeah, it was one of those where I never wanted to move there. Even when I was visiting, I didn't really want to move there. I kind of probably misled you a little bit too when I said I asked to relocate. I had a boss who was leaving who said, you should relocate to New York because who knows what's going to happen. And I think you being closer to New York is going to give you like more career opportunities. And I said, okay. And so it didn't take me a lot of convincing, but I wasn't like dead set on ever moving to New York. And it was almost like the second I got there and like, you know, had your apartment and were, even like unboxed, like all my stuff still in boxes. It just felt like I belonged here. And I don't think that's anything about me. I think it's something special about the city. There's this sense that like as soon as you live there, you belong there. And it's just a really special city that I'm very happy I lived there. And my only regret is I wish I would have moved there right after college. Like I feel like I missed several more years I could have had there. But yeah, it's completely different than Atlanta, completely different than Indiana. But it's this kind of once in a lifetime kind of thing that I think everyone should experience if they have the opportunity.
And just in doing my homework for this show here,
Mhm.
in your role with the New York Stock Exchange, you met some pretty cool people along the way. What was
Yeah.
that journey like? What were some maybe interesting anecdotes from that? And then what was that next leap for you?
So when I was at the New York Stock Exchange, they didn't have a like uh, I wasn't like backfilling a role really, like social media kind of started. They had someone, but it wasn't like I had to do exactly what they were doing when I ended up I think semi replacing someone. And so when I was there, it was never like, hey, you have to do X, Y, and Z. It was like, your job is content. Go make content. And so I didn't quite know what I didn't know. And so I'd go there and I'd be like, hey, there's a lot of like cool people that come in here. Should we like do videos with them? Because we weren't. We were just taking photos of them. And the boss would be like, yeah, do videos with them. I was like, okay. And I would I'd actually do videos of them. Maybe be like walking by. I would get my phone or something. And then I kind of was like, this is kind of boring. Like, okay, Shaq walked by. Like I can go on Shaq's Instagram page and see him. It's more interesting than this. It's like, what if I give them my phone and they record a video? So we started doing that. And then it was like, hey, I'm Shaq. I'm here at the New York Stock Exchange. Really excited to be here. Can't wait to ring the bell. So I did that. Problem is, that was the same thing, whether you were Shaq, whether you were the Prime Minister of Australia, or whether you were any other celebrity. You just kind of had the same spiel. So that got really boring. And then it became, well, why don't we interview them? Like, let's ask them some questions. They're here for a reason. Like, no one's just coming to come. They're part of some business, or they've got some initiative, or they've joined a board, or they're investing. Like, they all have something interesting they're going to say. And so that again, when I was like, hey, what if I'm just on camera and I just take my phone and maybe I get a cameraman? We had cameramen at the New York Stock Exchange. Maybe I get them to film me if I can, but if not, I can just run down there with my phone. And they said, yeah, that's a great idea. So is this like constant, just like doing the stuff that made the most sense? And this is something that I did intuitively that I now tell all my direct reports to do is don't say no before me. So like just assume you can do anything. Ask me, but don't tell yourself you can't do it before you even bring it up to me. And that's kind of how I acted. It was like I don't think everyone was wild that I all of a sudden became kind of the face of the New York Stock Exchange on social media and our content, but it really, really worked and enough people were fine with it. And had I been like too nervous about that or didn't want to do it, I just wouldn't have brought it up. So it's this idea of like kind of not knowing what you're supposed to do and just following your gut instinct. And at the end of the day, I think businesses are so different. You've got like experience that you can rely on that informs your gut, but like every decision is slightly different. No decision is exactly the same as the decision before. So really, when you're hiring someone, when you're thinking about a job, you're thinking about how good of a decision maker am I? And so that's an important characteristic to have. And hopefully, I don't know if I just got lucky or I've got a good instinct, depending on what the question is or what the problem is. But that's how I ended up making some really cool content.
Certainly. And, I, my friends and family would give me a hard time. I've got this eagle eye for celebrities. And I think in an alternate universe, I'd be working for TMZ or some other tabloid because I just have the ability to spot them. And so I know sometimes when I've gone up to people and said hello or asked for a selfie, the heart starts racing, the sympathetic nervous system starts flaring up. Did you ever have that happen when you were going to have that interview with Shaq or meeting any other celebrity? Was there anyone you were particularly nervous to meet or approach?
Um, Yeah, you know what? It's the one. So it was funny. So the first at first it happens, you're nervous because you'd be nervous kind of no matter who it is, and you're on camera and you're doing this. And then you do a few reps and you get less nervous. And you also had to pitch them too because they'd come in. I'd have to convince them to do a video. It's not like, hey, hey, I'm Matt. I'm at the New York Stock Exchange. I make a lot of content for us. I'd love to grab you for like 30 seconds or 3 minutes or 10 minutes. And you also have to get past their PR person because they're there with someone. That's not like they're there alone. So someone else is going to have to agree too. So you have to like kind of navigate your pitch. And so sometimes if you're pitching the PR person, that's a little less intimidating. But the people that always made me, where your heart races a little bit, is the people that you watch that you really like. Like I didn't grow up a Lakers fan or a Shaq fan, and I definitely grew up a basketball fan. So there was like some element of that there. But we'd have people from like TV shows. I remember there's a guy from a Netflix show called Someone Feed Phil, and I was like watching that show and it's loving it. It's this great travel food thing, and he was there, and you've got to like be bold enough to kind of inject yourself, be part of it, and it was always easy when it was an ask for the New York Stock Exchange. It felt a little bit like a safety net. Hey, I'm filming a video for this. Every once in a while, I'll be like, hey, can I also get something personal? And that's when the heart kind of starts racing. And I remember there's plenty of celebrities that my wife really liked. And so I'd have to go, I'd be like, hey, can you make a video? Say happy birthday or say, hey, Courtney, big fan or whatever. Those were the tougher ones to do. So it was when it was personal is when you you get that knot in your stomach. And when it wasn't personal, you just kind of get used to it.
Makes sense. Makes a ton of sense. Now you mentioned you grew up a basketball fan. Were you a Pacers fan, or what team did you support
Yeah,
growing up?
so I was actually I'm from Milwaukee, so I'm a Packers fan, a Bucks fan. I would Brewers fan would be generous. I don't quite follow baseball as closely as maybe I did when I was younger, but yeah, definitely grew up playing. I was stupid. I thought I was going to be the first dual NFL NBA player ever, and I've got a dad who's 6 foot and 180, and that's about what I am. So I was never really gonna have the right size. I was just hoping to get lucky, but yeah, love that stuff growing up.
Yeah, I love it. It's a very reasonable aspiration. I feel
Mhm.
like every kid had
Yep.
that. There's a funny bit in Shane Gillis's most recent stand up about that. I'll let you dive into it at some point if you like stand up comedy, because he
Yep.
talks about whenever every kid has that realization that they're not going to be a pro athlete.
Hmm. It's
But
funny, depending on how delusional you are, it doesn't really hit you until all of a sudden you see pro athletes who are younger than you. And then it's like, then the dream's really gone. You're like, ah, this 18-year-old's killing it right now in the NBA, or this like 20-year-old is now the starting quarterback. And you're like, yeah, I guess that, not that you didn't already know the ship sailed, but that really like is the final nail in the
sets it
coffin.
in. Too funny. So back to your story here. So you're at the New York Stock Exchange for a few years, and then I know you have some other big inflection points that come around the corner for you. Was it the pandemic that was the next one for you, or what was the next one for you?
Before then. So one of the interesting things about my job, and again, this is being too stupid to know what you should and shouldn't be doing in a role. Um, the way the New York Stock Exchange makes money is two ways. You through trades, and we can't really do anything about that. People sell, buy, regardless of what we do, so there's nothing to do there. And the other way is companies list on our exchange or a competitor exchange, which it's really a duopoly. It's us and NASDAQ. You go to one of the two, and they have to pay a listing fee every year to be listed. And so part of my job ended up being pitching startups that were about to go public on our exchange versus the NASDAQ. And what I would do is, we had all the other stuff. Like I was just a small part of it. I wasn't leading the pitch. I would just come in, say my marketing bit, but it would be, hey, this is your coming out party. This is when people are really going to know about you, or at least when all eyes are going to be on you. And we're going to help tell that story. We're going to get investors, but we're going to get customers excited too about you. So we're going to make sure that you're doing all the interviews on CNBC and Fox Business and wherever else you want to go. And we're going to do videos with you, and we're going to post them on, we'll give them to you so you can post them in your social. We'll post them on our social. And when you look at the average impressions that we get, when you add it all up, it's 8 times the size of NASDAQ. And so if you're looking for like a really big splash on IPO day, come to the New York Stock Exchange. And so I did that. I probably from like even day one. So I probably did it for 4 years. And maybe like 2 or 3 years into that, I told myself, I want to be on the other side of that table. And I knew I didn't have the ability to like start a company that would go public, but I could maybe identify a company that could go public and work there. And so this is probably 2018, 2019. I remember the list of companies that I interviewed with to join. Like looking back on it, is a really impressive list. Like I want to say Airbnb, Robinhood, Peloton, WeWork. I mean, it was like really every unicorn of the late 2010s I had interactions with. And what stopped me from doing it was they were all too big. They had already, $50 billion valuations. And so one, if I got equity, it wasn't going to do that much because the point of equity is you need the equity to go up. They're not going to, $1 million in equity is only $1 million if like that's the price when you're selling it. So I realized I had to go upstream a lot more. So I then, this is around the same time I started tweeting. And around that time, I was like, all right, let me see any interesting company that just did a Series A. And let me see if it makes sense that they need marketing. They have a little money. They probably need a little marketing. And so I just started reaching out to every CEO that was, at this kind of like seed Series A level that also had what I thought would be potential to go public. And finally found one. It took honestly 18 months maybe to find one. And then in this time, the pandemic happened and stuff. So it was this interesting kind of ride. And even the job I ended up getting, I think I reached out to the guy 6 months before and got it 6 months later. So yeah, so it was this desire to be at a startup and to be on the other side of the negotiating table.
Too cool. You could probably make a cool stock chart or basket of the companies you were interviewing with at that time and seeing where
Yeah.
their what their
I
performance
think, I
was
think
over.
they're all I think they're all down. I think there was a time I remember looking at it and it's like I was the kiss of death for the like companies. Like you got some of them are down like 90% or so. Maybe some of them have like kind of evened out, but yeah, there's
Well,
probably more of a
maybe they needed a
you
social media expert. That's all. That's all. So
know.
you mentioned you started tweeting at this time too. What was the impetus for that? What got you into that realm? I mean, that was, you know,
Yeah,
pre a lot of the Elon craziness with X,
for
Twitter,
sure.
obviously. But what was the kind of reason that you started, getting your word out there on Twitter at the time?
It's you'll never guess it. It was spite.
Really?
So I had had a Twitter account for a while, and I had built up the New York Stock Exchange social media accounts on, different platforms. So I felt like I knew what I was doing. And we had a president who was really naturally charismatic and he was really good at social media and like really was kind of like I would give him some stuff, but he was able to like build his own profile without much, interference or direction from me. Then we got a new president, and she did not care about social media as much. So she wanted like a full social media plan for her that we could, execute on her behalf. And I was like, great, happy to do it. I love it. And so I put together this like really comprehensive social media plan for her to like really build up her, her name, her profile and stuff. And we had someone else in a different department. They felt like they wanted to own that, and they didn't want me to own it. So I gave my whole pitch. I had my whole plan, and they kind of said, we got it. Don't worry about it, Matt. Nothing. And I basically, as someone more senior than me, said, screw off. And so I thought, wow, that's something, huh? And so I literally just took the plan that I wrote for her and I just changed it to me and I just started doing it and it took off instantly. And I shouldn't say instantly, but it took off very quickly. And her account floundered, and it was like, oh, it's not mine. You told me not. You don't want me to work on this. So that was why. It was because I thought I had put together a really strong proposal for this, and I was dismissed. And I said, well, I'm not going to let this go to waste. I'm going to use it for myself then. And here we are.
I know you were a guest on Modern Wisdom. I'm a huge fan of that show, and on
Yep.
one of the recent episodes with Alex Hormozy, they're talking about how spite and revenge is such a good short term motivator, but it doesn't really last longer than maybe more than a decade, if you will. But
Yeah.
spite obviously was what got you started in that mission of tweeting and repurposing that social media package. What was the point where you're like, hey, this is really catching on? I really have something here.
Yeah. I would say the spite only lasted so long. The spite definitely didn't keep me going. The spite was like that got me started. What kept me going is I remember very early on, Jack Dorsey, who was the then CEO of Twitter, retweeted me. I was like,
Oh,
this is
cool.
awesome. Yeah. I'm like, I was like, all of a sudden I got like, 5 million views on something. And then maybe shortly after then I had a tweet go viral. And
Sorry,
it
do
was
you
at that
remember what the tweet was? I'm curious.
I do. It was I actually ended up even like kind of stealing someone else's work. It was an IKEA ad. So I was like posting about marketing and I was like, this ad campaign makes me really jealous or something. And it was an IKEA ad campaign where they recreated the like living room or bedroom sets of famous TV shows. So I think they had like The Simpsons and Friends and maybe Seinfeld or something. And I would just post clever ads and that one caught on for whatever reason. And so that all of a sudden just kind of what's funny is it didn't actually grow my followers, but it grew my like interest in this platform. And now I was like kind of hooked. It was like now I was chasing that viral high. And so then still kind of like now I have that energy to focus on it and I have the strategy that I've already built. And so that's what kind of like kept me going early on. And then what really ended up sealing the deal was I realized like this is a networking platform. This is how I can meet interesting people. And at the time, I like this is one thing I miss about Twitter. I don't think it's quite the same. You basically had really interesting or really smart people that were just sharing their thoughts for free. They weren't trying to get you to follow them. They weren't trying to get you to sign up for their class, or they weren't trying to sell you anything. It was just someone who was an expert in something that liked it so much they couldn't help but tweet about it. And because I had my account kind of growing at the time, and because I was in New York City, and because I could invite them to the New York Stock Exchange, which was closed to the public, I was able to meet a lot of interesting people just by going, "Hey, I love your tweets. Super interesting. If you're ever in New York, I'd love to host you for a closing bell and I'll buy you a drink after." And like that was the part that really like that's when it started like clicking of how interesting this was. And I did this day still remember all my coworkers made fun of me because I would like, like them really well, and if you brought a guest to work, they would, it's obvious, and they were always joking that I was going on these like blind dates and don't get murdered or anything, but it ended up working out really well for my career.
That's terrific, and so many good nuggets of learnings in there too. I was on a call for my full time job yesterday, and the client jumps on and says, "What are you, the next Joe Rogan or something?" And my coworkers are laughing, giving me a hard time, and I'm good friends with all of them. But it was just funny as my podcast content has picked up on my social media following. My coworkers and friends are giving me a hard time about it. And I'm like, I'm excited for hopefully one day this platform is able to grow, and I'll have my respective moment like that as well. But the networking component of social media broadly, but especially that interesting froth at the top of the layer of Twitter and X is particularly culty in a lot of ways, I feel.
Mhm. Yeah, completely. I just wish it would go back to the ways that it was. It felt a little more like a cool kids club back then, and I don't mean to say that uncool kids are there now, but and maybe not even cool kids. That's probably the wrong word. There seemed to be more of a sense of community there. That isn't quite there now. So there was this like, cool, I'll go meet this strange guy who wants to meet me because he met on Twitter, and we've interacted a few times, and I just like I guess that's still there, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just old and I'm like the old guy yelling at the cloud and things change and I don't like how it's changed, but it's no better or no worse.
Fair enough. And now, obviously, the platform's changed a lot where a lot of people, to your point, are using it to sell their class or monetize it or get you to follow them so they can, get their monetization up. But what's current state of play for your Twitter or X account? How are you thinking about growing your platform? Are you thinking about growing your platform and following further, or are you just, staying on your course and uh, balancing your thoughts and 2 cents with the world while, being a soon to be dad of two and balancing that with your day job as well?
Yeah, it's the way I've stopped trying to grow it. So the strategy that I had, 5 years ago, whatever, I've essentially just, slowly let it go. Mostly because my interests have changed. I don't have the same, like I used to wake up every morning, how many more followers do I have? And now I just don't, like that just doesn't interest me as much. And I think it's a result like I never wanted to like make money from my account. That wasn't ever the goal. It was I don't really know. You just kind of get addicted to those like numbers going up, but I never had like a monetization plan. And in fact, I would argue what I'm doing now with my life, with my career, that was my monetization plan. And so it was networking, it was being visible. And it's like, I feel like I am enough, probably not a main character on Twitter, but I'm like, the friend of the main character maybe on Twitter, or like enough where if you spend a lot of time on Twitter, you probably come across me at some point. And like that's all I was ever looking for, really. It's like I wanted to meet interesting people, and I think I can still do that. And it doesn't matter if I grow another million followers, or well, I shouldn't say, and I don't have a million, but if I grow a million to a million followers, I don't think it's going to change any way in how I interact with it. And one of the things I learned too is the bigger you are, the more people that want to kind of take shots at you, that want to dunk on you, that want to like disagree with you, so that they can say like, "Ha, look at I made this point that Matt didn't know. I'm smarter than him." And that stuff's just kind of tiring after a while. So there's a double-edged sword with it. But I now mostly use it to, I still share marketing stuff, but I've also started angel investing and started doing stuff like advising. And so I want to, kind of use the platform to share other people's stories and to share other people's businesses and to get eyes on there. The way that I look at it now is I have an audience. I have people that if I put out a tweet, I know a certain amount of people are going to see that tweet. And I think that's something pretty powerful. And I'm happy with just that. Like I've got other priorities than growing it. So just maintaining it is fine with me.
Super cool. Now, your angel investing career, what was that like? What was getting? I mean, obviously you were very close and in touch with a lot of the unicorns and other successful businesses that were able to list on their IPO day. But what was that like getting started as an angel investor? What was the interest there?
It was because I wanted to get up in the startup space and I wanted to like learn more. And you can only learn so much from one company. Not that, it could be the best company in the world, but every company kind of has different problems and different things that they've got to solve. So I wanted to like immerse myself more in there and I wanted a little skin in the game, like you're only going to be so involved if you are sitting on the sidelines. So I figured I would put up some of my own money on companies that I believed in and in spaces that I was familiar with. I've now since learned doing it. I know absolutely nothing, and it all feels like a crapshoot. But I still appreciate the learnings that you get along the way and meeting the people. And again, I feel like networking gets a bad name, like or has a bad rap. But it's a way to like network and meet people. And I want to meet like-minded people. I want to meet people that are building. I want to make people that aren't afraid to start a podcast and have their friends make fun of them because those are the people that change the world. Like it's the people that aren't afraid to look stupid, that aren't afraid of failing, that end up doing the most interesting things. It's like everyone laughs at you until you're a success, and then it's like I knew it from day one, and it's like no, you didn't. You were part of that group making fun, and like to me, those are entrepreneurs. So I've got a soft spot on for me for anyone who's like a content creator or a builder or like putting themselves out there in a way that is public and other people can kind of take shots from the cheap seats if they so are so want to.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. And also, what's fascinating to me is, and I talk about this on a lot of my episodes and other podcasts that I've been on. The way I think about it is, what's the worst that can happen? Even if
Hmm.
one person listens to this, but that one person's hopefully able to get one little nugget of value out of it, or even just uh, your significant other or your family or your friends are able to listen to this and have this kind of documented in history for you to look back on for the rest of your life. It's pretty cool for your kids to look at.
That was how I looked at my Twitter for a while. I got to a point too where it was like I was talking about marketing, but I was kind of just talking about whatever I was reading at that time. I was maybe applying bigger life lessons to marketing. And I thought about this as like, this is going to be an interesting diary at some point. This is like, I'm going to have kids. They can go back and read this at any point, and they're going to get an idea of who their dad was in 2019 or whatever date that they go back to. I think there's something interesting about that. And again, if they're the only ones who ever read it, or if they never even read it, whatever, but it's still this, archive of the way that you were thinking at that time in your life.
It's spot on. I totally agree with you there. Now, as we round out in your story here, what got you from leaving the New York Stock Exchange, and then you have two cool startups that you've worked at since then? I think two, is that right?
It's a three. So I'm on my
Okay.
third startup now. Yeah.
Walk me through that. I guess this kind of tail end of your journey where you're at now.
Yeah. So I'm currently at a company called Slice. They're known, I think they're known for like food delivery for pizza, like an Uber Eats for pizza, but it's not accurate.
Hmm.
They're actually a technology that helps facilitate online ordering that just happens to also do delivery. So my job right now is to figure out how to change that message, how to get people to understand, especially shops that were different, we have a different pricing structure, we have a different compensation structure, and we have different technology, and we send different we provide different value than those other platforms. Really excited. The way that I got there was, I think, Twitter. I think, or it's like honestly networking. The A couple months ago, the founder reached out to me and said, "Hey, we need help marketing. Do you want to help us marketing?" And I said, "Maybe I do want to help you do marketing." And we had a few conversations and ended up joining. Shortly after. It was a really exciting problem. It's. I feel very lucky to work on something that one is food. Everyone loves food. Everyone loves that stuff. But then also you're helping local businesses. I've since like having kids and living in I live in Atlanta, more of a neighborhood. The stuff that I miss about New York is being able to walk anywhere, being able to like get a piece of pizza on a corner, being able to like have all these different shops and houses all kind of like mixed up. You realize that like local businesses are actually what make a neighborhood special. And so I wanted to go, and I didn't want to go, so I'm very fortunate that I got to go somewhere that helps make that possible. This is a technology that I firmly believe in that makes it so that if you're a local restaurant that does a lot of to-go orders, you're going to do even more to-go orders, and they're going to be cheaper and it's going to be more efficient. And that's what makes selfishly a neighborhood that I want to live in thrive. Because if everyone's going to the Domino's or the Papa John's instead of Matt's Pizza is going to cease to exist. And so it was really exciting, area to work in. Before then, I was in an ad attribution space. So I was really putting together the marketing experience that I had. It was a B2B SaaS company that was helping you buy better ads. And so I was able to leverage that. And before then, I was at a company called Fast. They very famously crashed and burned if you're in that space. But what I actually think they did is, I think they were solving a problem where the TAM wasn't as big as they thought it was. When I say they, I mean the whole market. We raised more money than I think we necessarily needed. And then we were kind of a bit of a poster child for spending too recklessly, kind of thought the money was always going to be there. And then the economic tide turned, and we were the first kind of canary in the coal mine. And I think there's a lot of companies actually that are similar to Fast. They have a longer life than we do. And so I'm actually quite grateful that we had a quick death. It was like someone shot us in the back of the head and it was over. And I had a little bit of a warning, but not much. And so I think there's, people in that space and honestly a lot of, I'll say unicorns with air quotes, that are also, zombies. They're dead man walking and they've got enough money to last a few more years or, 2 years, whatever it is. But the market is kind of already spoken. So I'm happy that it was able to be quick and clean and move on with that, you know,
Such
failure.
a unique career path and unique journey, and why I enjoy talking to people like yourself. It's interesting that there's no kind of one way ticket to get to where you are, and hearing the you know zigs and zags where you could have stayed on course or not taken that risk is always fascinating to hear. So appreciate you sharing your career trajectory, life trajectory so far. Maybe in current moment, current state, what do you have your eyes set on the world of social media and the world of marketing? What's exciting you right now? What's scaring you right now? And what maybe any kind of parting words of wisdom for someone listening that might be in a similar position as you are.
Yeah, I can. Well, at least in terms of marketing, I can tell you what I'm focusing on right now. Is Slice is an interesting company. They're a B to B to C company. We need shops to adopt our technology, and then ideally people to order through Slice, whether that's a website or whatever. So you have to market to both sides. The B2B stuff is relatively straightforward. The B2C stuff, I think you can always do interesting things. Consumers get really tired of the same messages and the same delivery mechanisms. And so we had this role that I'd like to think went a little viral, called Pizza Influencer. I very purposely named it this. It was really a content creator. But this person just started. And I think there's a lot of interesting things we can do with content that just happens to be posted by Slice. All these shop owners have really interesting stories. All the customers are coming in, their characters and themselves. Like imagine a 2 a.m. pizza interview. Like that's going to be fun content. And we really just need to build awareness. So we've got someone, he's going to be the face of Slice. And I've always kind of had this opinion on social media that brands should not be afraid of making someone the face. It's no different than a spokesperson. It's no different than, the Geico commercials with the same actor over and over and over again. And the worst case, and everyone always goes, well, what happens if you get too big and they leave? And I have always said, I was like, what a good problem to have. Like, if they get too big and leave and they get known as the face, like I'm gonna hire a different face. Like it's not no, we're not gonna disappear.
It's like a sports
Um,
franchise.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. Like I got a star player and maybe the star player gets paid more money to go somewhere else, so be it. And if this, or the just whoever wants to retire, that's okay. That's a risk I'm willing to take. And I think that's actually a good metaphor for kind of like everything here. It's like the risk seems kind of low and trivial and the reward like is infinite. So why would I not try this? Why would I post the same boring content as everyone else or same like B2B content that isn't going to ever get anyone to share it or tell their friends about it? We want to do something different and exciting. And to me, this kind of goes back to this like, well, why don't I do videos with these celebrities when they're here? It's like the same idea. It's like, why don't I just make content that I would want to see? And so that's what we're doing. So I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then maybe just as we round out here, for those who want to, follow your journey and keep in touch with all things you're doing at Slice and then all the things you're doing just personally on your Twitter, where can they find you? Where can they stay in touch, get in touch?
Yeah, really easy. So you can always DM me and follow me on Twitter. It's just M Kobach. So M and then my last name. Same with Instagram. I will say my Instagram is mostly my kid. So if you're interested in seeing photos of my kid, follow me there. But if not, Twitter is where I share most of my thinking and probably the more interesting stuff to someone who doesn't know my kid.
Awesome. Well, Matt, I greatly appreciate your time today. Excited to watch the growth at Slice and in your life as your family grows, and then also your life continues to grow. So really appreciate the time, and I look forward to staying in touch here soon.
Thanks. And I will offer anyone who's listening free slice. If you just DM me, say, hey, I listened to this, and you said you'd give me some free pizza, I'll honor that. So just DM me with that message and I'll send you some free pizza.
Love it. Love it. Thanks, Matt. Have a great day.
Yep, you too.